case you haven't already met me, I'm Leland Smith, the owner of Service Champions, and I want to personally thank you for being part of the Service Champions team. The topic of this video, to be honest, is a little uncomfortable, but I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about, out in the open. There is one thing we do that no other contractor in Southern California does, and that's train. Constant training. Over 150 hours a year. No matter if you've been here for 1 year or 15 years, we are constantly training to improve. Because of this, Service Champion technicians are widely known in Southern California and throughout the industry as being the best of the best. It's because of the way we hire, we train, our core values, and our organizational structure. In fact, I've said this many times, if a Service Champions employee leaves the company, they'll have another job before they get out of the parking lot because our competitors know how well you've been trained, and since they do no training at all, you will be actively recruited by other companies to leave Service Champions. And they'll promise you everything under the sun. They'll promise you higher pay, more freedom, faster advancement, and more leadership. But I want you to know that these other companies rarely, if ever, fulfill these promises. Trust me, the grass is not greener on the other side. We have built one of the best HVAC companies in Southern California, if not the country. What you will see from these other competitors will shock you. We are not anywhere near the same. Unfortunately, we have lost dozens of employees to other companies over the years, and they almost always end up asking to come back. On this video, we've interviewed several Service Champions employees who've left the company, found that life outside Service Champions wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, and then came back and got rehired. But don't take my word for it. Listen to these people. These are their stories. Take notes and see if you can spot the consistent themes that come up over and over again. Now let's listen.
I started working at Service Champions in November of 2012. I was a happy employee here for 4+ years. Unfortunately, the last 6 months of my tenure here, I had a disagreement with one of my managers. I believe that I should have taken the time to speak to Leland Smith before considering going to another company. Unfortunately, I did not. I know now that I should have. After speaking to Mr. Smith, I definitely would never walk out that door without talking to him. I went into a role with a different company who offered me the same position, painted a really good picture for me on what I could do and what I was going to be in charge of. The first 2-3 weeks was great, felt pretty good. It changed after about a month when we started getting busy. My input was no longer taken seriously. After explaining my decision making and the role that I took on, it was a lot of decision making, and I didn't feel comfortable making certain decisions. I didn't last long. I only lasted about less than 5 months. And so I went ahead and I was reached out to by a different colleague of a different company who had offered me a position similar to what I was accustomed to. I made the switch. I was there for about 6 months. It was really good. It was really positive for the company. I helped make some moves to hit company goals that they've never hit before, which were really positive for the owner as well as the managers and myself. But it was only during peak time, which was the summertime, and unfortunately, we slowed down and there was nothing more that I could possibly do. I was really looking for an opportunity to grow, and I didn't have that opportunity to grow. And so that's what led me to making another change. At this other change, I took a lower position, just a regular dispatcher, and it was working out great. I was doing fine, but there's no structure there. There was definitely not the leadership that I was accustomed to wasn't there. The opportunity wasn't there. I was actually doing pretty good with my position. We weren't as busy as Service Champions. I've always kept in touch with a lot of people from here, and I met some really nice people here. And so it was at a barbecue that I had that I was invited to by Ray Gonzalez. So I got there, and it just so happens that all the FSRs are there, all the senior technicians are there, and we were just chit-chatting and conversating, and they were kind of telling me why'd you leave, and asked me what would you ever consider, and I was like, yeah, of course, I'm open to it, absolutely. And then less than 2-3 days later, Gary asked me if I would consider coming back. It was really positive, and actually the managers that were here were very comforting, very enthusiastic to go and have me back in there, and they were really positive, and so I liked the vibe that I got when I came back. And so I was like, why did I leave? It really is true when they say that when they want to be like service champions, but they can't take everybody here. You need everybody here to go ahead and implement what Service Champions does at other companies, and unfortunately, nobody compares. I honestly think that the leadership here is what's different and stands out. It's apparent.
So I've been with Service Champions for about 10 years in replacement residential sales. And in April of 2017, I decided to part ways, thinking that the grass was greener somewhere else. There was a manager that wasn't really there for me. I never really went to Leland. I never called him. I never brought it up. I always just went, to our manager. And actually, my wife told me, hey, you need to go to Leland. And she's like, have you brought it up to him? And I was like, no, I went to our manager, he's our go-to guy. At that point, I told my wife, you know what, I'm just gonna terminate myself and try to see if I can find a place where the grass is greener. So I decided to go to a place that was actually a lot closer to my home. Come to find out, I would have to drive way further than what I drive to come at Service Champions. They weren't honest with me when they told me about the business. It just wasn't adding up. I was seeing a lot of changes, a lot of money holes that we would normally never let happen here at Service Champions. We were struggling. I noticed that they were praying that we made payroll. A lot of companies work in seasons, and they have one season all year that they work, and the rest is just there's no work. There was a month in December that has 31 days. I think we only ran 17 calls, so almost less than half a call a day. It got to the point where, I was just pulling money out of the savings, and I started seeing that go down. And, I knew I couldn't let it happen too long. Something had to happen. At that point in January, Gary called me and he's like, hey, how you doing? And let's go out for lunch. And when we went out for lunch, that conversation was brought up, and that's when we said, hey, well, maybe would you consider coming back? Let's talk about it. And it was just a relief when, I decided to come back, and, now things are back normal, better than things were. So other companies where I went, I felt like it was easier because there was no structure. And unfortunately, that philosophy it hurt the company because there is no direction, there is no structure, there is no achieving, no goals. Well, I think if I would have listened to my wife's advice, which, I promised Leland from now on I will. I think if I would have talked to Leland, I'm pretty sure Leland would have made the changes, and I would have never had to go and suffer and go through all that. He's just that type of person that cares, especially when you work with him for, several years. You're just not another number. You end up, it's like family, and that's exactly what he said when I came back. Daniel, you're family. I'm here for you, and he just opened the doors and welcomed me back, and we just were able to pick up where we left off. And it didn't take 10 years, it took 10 months for me to be back and realize that the greenest grass is here.
I started working for Service Champions in April 2017. Previously worked for my dad as a sign installer. So my first month out in the field, I actually broke the company record for the total points off of leads, service revenue, and clubs. And I was like, hey, you know what, maybe this is for me. The 4-month mark is when I moved up to service tech. I was working a lot of hours, and I made the mistake of not talking to anybody. I just held it all in. Everything it happened in a matter of a week. I just said, I'm done. I made a call to Home Comfort. If you come over here, I'll give you a set schedule. What do you want, Monday through Friday? And I said, yeah, I'd like to, be off at a decent time. Is there any way I could be off at 5? And he said, yeah, you won't be dispatched after 5. I was like, okay. 3 weeks in, and everything was actually seeming to go good, but they're commission-based. Say a month and a half, 2-month mark, I started noticing my paychecks weren't as full as they used to be. and I was actually producing more. And so I called Ken and I was like, what's going on? How come I'm not being paid? And he goes, oh, well, you have to wait for the finance company to pay us and then we pay you. And then now they want me working more hours over there. And I wasn't being paid like I was supposed to. So it was a constant battle every week with the owner. It was getting close to my daughter's birthday. It was actually a week out, and it was on a Saturday. And he's like, hey, I need your help on Saturday. And I was like, well, I can't, it's my daughter's birthday. I was like, I'm not working Saturday. And he's like, well, I really need you to work, I'll pay you extra. I was like, I can't, it's my daughter's first birthday, I'm not gonna miss it. And he flat out told me, you're working Saturday, so what if you miss a couple birthdays? And that just hit me. I was like, you know what, I'm done here. At that time, I also already made the phone call to Gary, and Gary's like, let's go dinner tonight. When you looking to come back? And I said, as soon as possible. I didn't want to come back and then everybody laugh or, have their opinion about me. When I went to the dinner with Gary, I just couldn't believe, how welcomed I was. He was excited, and I didn't think I was gonna get that coming back. And it was crazy to see some of the other techs that had the same mindset that I was going through ask me, what was it like over there? And usually their main question is, do you get paid more? Yeah, if you don't mind sitting back and waiting. I mean, how would you like to know that you've been paid and you gotta wait a month to cash that check though, because it won't go through. You can't plan your finances around that. Where I thought I was gonna be making big paychecks to pay off certain bills, I was getting minimum paychecks. And that's what made me call the owner all the time, like, dude, you need to fix this. My only regret is I didn't call Leland before just taking off. You have the help here. You can call Gary, you can call Leland. They're gonna do whatever it takes to help you out. And that was me just being me, being closed-minded, and just said, you know what, I'm gonna go do this on my own. And it didn't work out. So, I really wish I would have just made the phone call and fixed it. I would have never left, and I would have just been here the whole time.
I was doing business-to-business sales prior to Service Champions. Came here in 2015 in January. I was here for about 2 years. I did well. I moved through the ranks as fast as I could. During that time, I was starting to do okay with that, and then I was having some back issues with lifting some of the equipment. And really, it took one time of me not lifting something correctly, and that was it. It doesn't matter how much money I make, it's not worth me living in pain or having a messed up back. So an opportunity opened up at another company. I was adamant about not using my back. I told them why I left here, and they said it was great. So I signed up. I started that, and that lasted for probably 8 months. Oh, I was a golden boy at the other place. They didn't have to pay for any money to train me. They just throw me out there and I bring money in. They would give you rewards or bonuses, whatever, if you could bring other people over. Get them in for the summer, because that's when they need them, and then they usually dwindle off in the winter time. One of the main things that was said to us is, oh, we're not like Service Champions. I mean, they said it in a good way, but they weren't like Service Champions in a very bad way. They were thinking not as many hours, it's not as strict, but you need that. That's why I wouldn't start some days at 2 o'clock. Several hours out of the day that I wasted. So things like that, where they promise you that you're gonna make money there, it's all about the money to them. Never about the client, that's for sure. Kind of a running joke over there was wondering if the job that you sold, not that it would get installed, but how well it would be and how soon you would hear back from a client who was angry. There was one job in particular that I had sold. It was for a really decent amount of money. The guy spent about $27,000 on this unit. And 2 to 3 weeks go by, they finally get it installed, the unit doesn't work, they can't get it started. Just one thing after the next went wrong with this guy. Great guy too, and I just feel bad for him. The company came back to me like it was my fault, that I didn't tell him it would probably be 3 to 4 days more of an install. And they tried to screw me out of my money and take my money away. How I came back was I kept in touch with management here. Gary a little bit, mostly Frank Spear. He'd call me, see how I was doing. He'd even offer me help on issues I was having there. Just constant contact with him, really an opportunity opened up here and I took it. Once I thought about it, talked to my wife, it was obvious I needed to come back here, especially since the opportunity opened up. Glad I didn't hesitate on that. Nobody's perfect, but I could tell you from experience, Service Champions makes it right. Don't leave. If you leave here, leave to get out of heating and air. It just may not be for you. To go to another competitor, don't do it.
I started early 2014. I was working for a competitor, and one of the managers here at the time had reached out to me that I had been friends with and said, why don't you go ahead and finally, make the jump. So I was here for about 2.5 years. About early 2016, a few changes started to happen, and management at that point had gotten me to kind of just start to look at the company in a bad light. And I made a rash decision to just quit. And so I did go to work for another competitor, and at first it was fun. Again, it's back to the honeymoon stage. It's something new. But I shortly realized all the things that I had learned to hate and despise about Service Champions, as far as, God, they're always watching you with this. They're always making you do the paperwork, this. You suddenly realize there was a reason for all of it. I was at the other company for a couple years, and I finally said, okay, enough's enough. I knew, though, it was going to be hard to come back. But I also knew that it was the best decision, and if I was going to make the most amount of money, this was going to be the place. If I was going to actually want a boss, an owner that was truly going to take pride in everything that I just promised the client, if I was truly going to have installers that looked at their job as an art. Other companies, I don't have to sell a job and then the next day instantly my phone's ringing off the hook because I have an upset client, or installers didn't even show up to the job, or my paperwork got lost. You start to now say, I understand why there's accountability. I understand why there's structure. I understand why we do the things that we do that no other company does. Here, I had goals. I was tracking my goals every day, every month. I knew my RPL, my revenue per lead. I knew how many calls I had to run. I knew what I needed to do to hit a certain number at the end of the year. I stopped all that. When I did that, not only did I kind of give up on myself, I gave up on my family and a lot of the things that I was excited to be able to do for them. I did reach out to Leland to say, first off, thank you for everything. I knew at that point I was thinking about it from his eyes, how that everything that he did for me, everything that he promised that he was going to do, it had to have been almost like a slap in the face to him when I quit. And that hit me hard, because he did do a lot. And it's not just me, he does stuff for everybody here. And I text him real simple, I want to come back home. And it took him maybe about 5 minutes to respond and said, let's meet. The transition was quite easy to come back. And then you come back and it's a lot like I never left. But in a lot more good ways also, because again, a lot of the things that would kind of irk me, I now learned to respect. And for the longest time, I thought accountability was bad. Accountability is actually good if you look at it the right way, because it's going to keep you on point. It's structure. Whether anybody wants to believe it or not, everybody needs structure. Everybody needs a routine. It just goes to show that everybody does truly care for one another. Everybody does truly come together. I have calls. I have a paycheck. I'm just happy again. And I wasn't for a long time.
So I started at Service Champions in the fall of 2010. I was here for roughly 6 years, then I took off for 2 years. Now I've been back for about a month, and the role I'm at, I'm loving it. Prior to me leaving Service Champions, I was a field advisor for roughly around 15 technicians, and Leland and a few of the other managers, we had a sit down, and he was very adamant. He didn't want me to leave, but ultimately he left it up to me. And investing 6 years of my life into a company, I felt like I earned that role that I was in. I just didn't feel like they were investing in me the same way. And that's just when I chose to go a different way. So when I left Service Champions and I went to the first company, it was very different. It's a very seasonal company, meaning you make great money when there's weather, but when there's no weather, you do not. And I'm not talking about you make a little bit of money, I mean you make no money. It was a huge change coming from a company like this to a company like that. So my experience at the second location, it was a lot better than the first one, but it still wasn't perfect. It's my coworkers too. When they're not structured, you depend on other people to make money, to work. It's a big chain. It's the management, it's the dispatchers, it's the call center. Everyone has to work together. And it wasn't a good functioning company. And the company I worked for, they were actually gonna start working in Orange County, which made me think of Leland just immediately. I said, hey, I'm gonna be in Orange County. I said, I just need to give him a call immediately. He called me back immediately and he said, meet me tomorrow. My wife, the thing about her is she just wants me to be happy. And when I told her I was thinking about going back to Service Champions, she just looked at me and said, it's about time. So she knew I was always happy here. We kind of sat down and figured out what would be the best role for me. And he wrote something up, and I started about 2 days later. So it was a very fast process because I felt so comfortable. It was one of those things that I didn't really have to think about. It was, we met, he wrote something up. I think that was a Friday, I started Monday. I'm a type of person that, yes, I enjoy making money, I love structure. It just really depends on what kind of person you are, but I would think very, 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 very hard before you make a decision like that of leaving a company like this, because they offer you so much. I mean, it's not just the money here, it's not just starting a career here. I mean, it's cheesy, but it's like a family. I know everybody. I can call anybody at any time. I mean, I don't know another owner of a company that I can call on a Sunday afternoon and he picks up his phone and helps you out. And I can tell you here that happens, so.
So I started here at Service Champions January of 2018. I was here about 6 months. I did really good my first month. Second month came out, did really, really well. I think for June I had top turn leads and top service revenue. But what happened was the third month I came out and I was doing a lot of repairs, but the problem is I'm not happy just fixing things and working on it hourly. So that ultimately I took off and went to another company. So one of the biggest things with the other company I was at is nobody really helps anybody. Over here, when I had an issue and I couldn't get a supervisor on the phone, I mean, there was 50 technicians I can call. There was people always willing to help. So I went over there, and this one in particular time I remember because I called my manager and it was a low voltage issue. And I call him and I'm like, hey, can you tell me how to check for continuity so that I can go ahead and figure this out and get him a new board or a rewire? And he tells me, just sell him a new one. I'm like, that's your advice? He's like, sell him a new one, that's all you gotta do. There wasn't much support over there. It was, if you weren't selling, don't talk to them. We would go up to Santa Barbara, bound to San Diego, past Palm Springs any given day. So you never quite knew where you were at. One day, because I remember telling my kid, I got home at 1, and I remember it was 490 miles in one day. People started noticing that, there was an issue with pay. It became something that became constant. It's like, I didn't want to deal with that anymore. And that was very, very frustrating. And I don't ever have to deal with that over here. Even if for some reason a mistake's made, they'll take care of it for you here. I got Gary's number. So I gave Gary a call. I said, hey, I'm ready to come back. I spoke with him and Leland. With no problem, they welcomed me back. So I was glad they did. I didn't know how it was gonna go because of the way I left. Yeah, I'm grateful and thankful that they did let me come back here. The thing is, the company I went to, They're kind of a melting pot where a bunch of other people came from different companies, and you hear the same stories everywhere. No pay, not enough work. My advice to you is, if you're kind of on that edge, on that fence, bother somebody. Talk to them. If you don't talk to them, it's not going to get fixed.
So this is the story of how I left Service Champions for 4 very long days and made a very big mistake, and now I'm happy to be back. So I've been with Service Champions for about 8 years now, and the thing that really had gotten me was the fact that, I never knew when I was going to get off. I had a friend that had worked here for a year. He was very successful. He was not happy with the way the company was ran because it was so structured. You had to be on time. So he ended up leaving and going to another company. He was actually in my ear the whole time and telling me, hey, you know what, I'm off by this time. You know what, you really should consider coming over here. They would love to have you. You're great at what you do. And I kept pushing him off. He had a whole week off for the week of Christmas. And that's whenever I made the decision that I didn't want to be here anymore. So I had turned my van in, and immediately that day I had went over to the other company. I would go to lunch with the sales manager. The next thing you know, we're eating sushi, we're drinking beers, and basically having a good time. The next day comes along and we're doing the same thing. And what it comes down to is they actually probably really didn't have the calls. I felt really bad because I felt like I had kind of betrayed the company that I worked for this. I literally went home, and actually I told them I had an emergency. I left, and that was whenever I had called Leland on the way. And I was pretty much in tears almost, to be honest with you. That was pretty bad for me. I told him what had happened, and I just told him I'm sorry. I apologize. I made a big mistake, and I would like to come back. He just said, you know what, let's just do this. He goes, you just take the weekend, go ahead and enjoy your family. He goes, we'll talk about it on Monday. That was probably the most nervous weekend I've had in a long time. So Monday I came in, Leland allowed Gary to go ahead and share some concerns he had. And at that time, I didn't realize it, but now I realize what they were trying to do. It's just, you cannot be successful without keeping structure. And that's really what it came down to. And it's just, they have a reason for everything, and that's why the company has been successful. They see something in people more than that person sees in themselves, and I think that's what makes this place a little special, because there's a lot of people a lot of companies don't really want to put that effort into someone. They just kind of want to throw you out to the wolves and let you do your thing. Whereas here, they provide the training. These things are taken for granted. That is not normal anywhere else. That's why a lot of people leave here, is because they really struggle with they focus on everything around them. The company, the meetings, dispatch, install, whatever it may be. And when you do that, all you're doing is you're focusing on things that you really have no control over.
I know the exact day I started at Service Champions. It was September 15th, 2014. And before that, I was on active duty for 18 years. And when I first started, I did really well, and everybody's like, of course you're doing well. They want you to be here. They're gonna try to give you good calls. So there was a group in the back that was just negative, but they were trying to be your friend. And of course, I was the guy, hey, give me that next call. I'll take one late shift. I'll work my days off. So I didn't take a day off until about the birth of my daughter. And that is when everything comes spiraling out of control. My daughter was born, she had a heart murmur 2 days later. It was pretty touch and go for a minute, and everything just kind of became overwhelming. Instead of saying, hey, look guys, I need some time off, or I can't do this, I would just do it, and then later complain to other techs and be part of that negative group. Then those same negative guys were leaving. When I left, I was offered $2,500 to leave. So I took it, and then you realize that $2,500 quickly goes, because they don't have a big clientele. So when it's slow, there's no calls. I was sitting at home or just sitting in my truck and just thinking, what did I do? Well, the one thing I've noticed that's a standard across the board of the companies, they all have Service Champions at the top of their tongue. They will say, we're just like Service Champions, but We're not going to micromanage you. We're not going to do this. They also don't do any good installs. So the quality of work wasn't there. You'd go to calls where you're almost, frankly, you were embarrassed to be there because you look at a unit and you're like, it looks horrible. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to. They spent all this money. So I instantly pulled the manager over and said, hey, I'm not okay with this. And he said, don't worry about it. It's not your problem. So I left. I went to a commercial outfit, and I had been total, I think, grand total different companies I'd been to had been 5. When one of a text from a different company and a technician from Service Champion said, look, man, you keep talking about going back there. What's holding you back? And I said, I'm afraid they're going to tell me no. And he was like, they're telling you no right now because you're not even asking. So I made the phone call, called Gary. We spoke very, very briefly. Felt positive about it. And he said, look, I'll get back to you. And he says, but I'm going to be honest with you, Peter. I don't want negativity. I'm like, the things we complain about, I would beg to have now. I would, it's so nice to get a call the night prior to be told, all these things that we do, they're only there to help us, but you don't see it initially. So I told Gary, everything I've experienced has just made me much more appreciative of what we have here. When I came back here as a maintenance tech, it was a step back I took, but I told my wife, I'm good friends with Alfredo, and I told her, look, babe, he's made more money than me being a service technician while me being a sales guy. Ask yourself, if somebody's willing to pay me $2,000 plus to leave this place, why? It's because you're a better asset to them than they are to you. Every company's gonna have a group, and no matter how hard we try, there's always gonna be a negative group. Stay away from those guys. Listen to the guys that are successful, but really, really ask the guys who have left, why are they back?
Okay, so what do you think? You might be asking yourself, why did we make this video? Well, the truth is, I don't want you to make the same mistake that some made before you. We both have invested a lot of time and money in your career, and almost every time when the employee leaves for another company, they regret it. Before you make any rash decisions, ask around. I just want to help you realize that we are truly different. We have the best pay and the best working structure, and that is one of the main reasons we have the most successful employees in the country. I'm telling you, you will be recruited by other companies. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. My goal is to make being part of a team such a great experience that you will want to continue to be part of the family and stay forever. But if you ever are tempted by big promises, just remember this video and the employees who have left to greener pastures and then come back. Most importantly, as you've heard, call your manager, call your general manager, or even call me on my personal cell number. It's the same number my children call me on. So if I don't answer, please leave me a message. I promise I'll call you back and listen to anything you have on your mind. I am never too busy to listen to one of my team members. Just know this, you matter. Thank you, and let's work hard to create a great career for you.